Ever since Australia first joined the World Motorcycle Championship calendar back in 1989, just 4 manufacturers have won at Phillip Island, which makes this top 5 just a little bit different. Of course, Suzuki, Ducati, I could have said Casey Stoner at that point, and Yamaha have won around the island, but it's Honda that has been the dominant manufacturer over that period. 15 wins shared between 9 riders at Phillip Island. Today, we're going to count down the Honda heroes who've tasted success in Australia. I'm Matt Clayton. With me is MotoGP race winner Chris Vermeulen. And Chris, Honda's had success in lots of places, of course, but there's something about this track and that bike that has married very nicely over the years, isn't it?
Well, the Honda worked for a long time at a lot of tracks. But here, you can go back to the early days, can't you? Honda was dominant. Honda's been dominant right through the Repsol era, and it's still a very, very good motorcycle to be on. I was lucky enough to ride a V5 Honda around here the first time I ever sat on a MotoGP bike, and it was pretty special, I'll tell you that.
Pretty special. And memories of that first weekend, I seem to think you had the world's busiest calendar at that point from doing superbikes.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I did Imola, Magny-Cours, thought I'd finish my season, runner-up in the World Superbike Championship, get a call, Troy Bayliss has broken his wrist, will you ride his V5 Honda? Well, it didn't take me long to answer that.
That'll be
Flew
a
to
yes.
Phillip Island, and then the next weekend was Istanbul, so 4 weekends in a row. But I tell you, Phillip Island was the highlight. To step on that thing, never in the Michelin tyres, never in electronics, never in a V5, Honda. That thing is just iconic. And Sito Pons as your team owner, I was just in awe. It was very cool.
Yeah, it's certainly been a very successful brand down at Phillip Island over the years. So let's get into our top 5. Number 5, 2016, Cal Crutchlow. Cal's one of a number of guys who've won one MotoGP race at Phillip Island, but 2016. It was so difficult down there that year because it was a later race start, and in case you haven't, spoiler alert, Phillip Island gets cold in October, and maybe it was, I don't know, riding...
When isn't it cold, sorry?
Fair, but maybe all that experience of riding in the UK when he was a young bloke or what have you, but he mastered a really, really tricky track that day to take his win for Honda, and look, the conditions were so difficult, weren't they?
Oh, really, really difficult. In that race, the wind changed direction, and if you live down that area, the temperature can just drop when that happens. And during the race, it just became harder and harder for the guys to keep temperature in their front tyre, particularly. Marquez had a massive lead, went down in one of the right-handers. There you go. And there's only 2 of them on the track, isn't there? So
yeah.
A hairpin corner crash for Marc, and it was while he was cruising, basically. And Cal at the end of the race said it was really difficult to manage that because I had to keep pushing to keep temperature in the tyre, but I didn't want to push and crash. So it was like really balanced on that knife edge, and he did a fantastic job.
Well, and the guys after the race were saying every time you got to turn 4, you'd been on the left-hand side of the tyre on about 10-degree track temps at that point. So every time you brake for turn 4, you were like, oh, is this thing going to grip for me? Because as the laps ticked down, the temperature just went completely south.
Yeah, and really difficult to ride these things, because in hindsight, they would have probably chosen a different tyre. If it was an open tyre rule, would have picked something that would have worked. But when you're limited, that's what you got, and that's what you got to deal with.
Number 4, Mick Doohan. Mick Doohan needs no introduction as one of the great Honda riders, or one of the great riders of anything, quite frankly. But, look, a Honda hero at any track, won his home Grand Prix in 1998, and look, he has to go down as one of the great riders for Honda at this track, doesn't he?
Great riders for Honda anywhere. 54 Grand Prix wins, dominant lap records at lots of tracks. 5 World Championships in a row. Got a corner named after yourself here. A corner he crashed at in 97 and then
He didn't want you to mention that, by the way.
Did he tell you? But 98, fantastic win by Mick. Really impressive, really dominant. I think there was a strong Simon Crafar in second place on Dunlop tyres.
Yes.
That probably had an advantage over the Michelins, but Mick wasn't going to be beaten at home, and really strong Grand Prix.
Well, and to win that one race at Phillip Island, to secure a 5th straight 500cc world title, it was completely fitting that it was done in his own backyard, wasn't it?
I know, and that's just Mick, isn't it? Another record, another stat, and he was so dominant in that era.
Number 3, Casey Stoner. Now, Chris, I know what everyone's saying here. Casey Stoner, number 3 at Phillip Island in anything, quite frankly, but we're talking about Honda riders here.
Yep.
He only raced on a Honda twice in MotoGP at Phillip Island.
No, 3 times.
3 times, very true. LCR, the one race he didn't win. I'm glad you corrected me. But those last 2 years on the Repsol bike in 11 and 12, won both of those races as the tail end of his 6 in a row there. But 2 really iconic wins in his career. 2011 because he won the world title. And 2012, it was like the final, it was the farewell, perfect farewell. We knew he was leaving. It was the final chance he was going to race in MotoGP in front of his home fans. Tick both boxes.
He did, and come back from injury in 2012. Broken ankles not long earlier in the season, and But that was Casey. Everyone said it was the Ducati, and Casey could manage that around the island, and then he got on the Honda and he wasn't touched. So it was Casey Stoner. He was dominant. He proved that, you know, he could win on either motorcycle, and either motorcycle was capable of winning around there. So it's just cool to watch the difference for me, the way he rode the Ducati to the way he rode the Honda, but he still got the lap time out of both motorcycles.
Yeah, still achieved 2 wins, 2 poles, 2 fastest laps and 2 Repsol Hondas. It's a perfect way to sign off on your tenure in MotoGP, isn't it?
He wasn't bad around this place at all, was he?
Not bad at all. Number 2, Valentino Rossi. Now, Chris, I'd like to look at Rossi's Island career. I mean, it's really a career of 2 halves, wasn't it? Because he was so good here on the Honda as we went from 500 into MotoGP. Then he had the second run with Yamaha, and obviously an 8-time winner at this circuit. But he's had some incredible victories on Hondas down there. Won the World Championship when he just beat Max Biaggi in the 500 era. But then 2003, he won a lot of Grand Prix, Valentino. But to win that race in 2003, one of his greatest wins, I'd say.
Yeah, one of his greatest wins. We spoke about in another video where he had to, you know, he got a penalty for overtaking under a yellow flag and had to win by more than 10 seconds and won by 15 seconds. That just showed how dominant Rossi was. I think 01 was really impressive, that win on the 500s. And, you know, for him, I think it meant more just to give it to Biaggi than anything else. Like those two really didn't like each other at the time, and that probably stands out a lot to Valentino, I reckon.
Well, it was kind of a home race to some degree, because pretty much everyone in his box, in his corner, Jeremy Burgess, so many of the mechanics, Alex Briggs, and it's basically a de facto Australian team, wasn't it?
It was very much so. It was pretty much Mick Doohan's old team, and some of those guys even go back to Wayne Gardner, you know, so a lot of Aussies in there. Valentino loves the Aussie humour as well, and he loves coming down to the island and racing, and he's got so many cool moments. I've interviewed him on TV and asked him about this, and every time I ask him, he thinks about a different one, because the weather might remind him of it or whatever. But to win around here 8 times, you know, on all different sorts of motorbikes, it's pretty impressive. He's got an affinity with the track. He loves the place. He loves the speed. He loves the way it makes racing close, apart from if you're on his Honda in 2003. But yeah, it's Valentino Rossi, and he loves Phillip Island.
Now, Chris, before we get to number 1 on our list, we probably should have the honourable mentions corner. On a Honda, Wayne Gardner won in 1989 and 1990. Certainly did the job for Honda at a time where the World Championship was really finding its feet on this circuit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, both those wins were impressive, and you think you should add Wayne to this list, and he deserves to be there, but it's so hard, isn't it? You know, when you've only got 5 to pick from. But those races in 89, you know, when Wayne had a lot to do with bringing the championship here, and then 1990 racing with a broken wrist and almost high-siding out, and then coming through the field, 2 very special moments for sure.
And no shortage of drama either, Chris.
There never is around Wayne Gardner.
Certainly not. Number 1, Marc Marquez. Marc Marquez on a Repsol Honda at Phillip Island. It sounded like a match made in heaven, given that it's an anti-clockwise track. We know how good he is on tracks going left, but from the moment that he came here, he's got this incredible record where he's won it 3 times, probably should have won it about 6 or 7 times, quite frankly. 13, he was disqualified when he was in the lead, crashed from the lead in 14 and 16, got taken out by Johan Zarco at turn 1 in 2018. Every other year, 13, 15, 17, Grand Prix wins, but not just matter-of-fact Grand Prix wins, incredible Grand Prix wins.
Oh, he's so fast around this place. He's like the new Casey Stoner, and I've got to say, what I know about Marc is when he got into the Repsol Honda team, he pretty much replaced Casey when he retired. When he got to Phillip Island, he knew how special Casey was. Not only this track, but in particular this track, how special Casey was, and he used that data and that information and worked out where Casey was quick and how he made the Honda do what it needed to do around here, and he just took over from it and probably made it even better again, you know, and he was so fast, so dominant. It's just that Marc makes more mistakes than anyone else, and at Phillip Island, it's a little mistake has big consequences with that high speed. He's
good at saving them out of the hairpin at turn 10 there as well. But there's a couple of things I always think of Marc here. 2022, where he was nowhere near fully fit after the 4th surgery on the shoulder.
And the Honda's probably not in a good place.
Honda's not in a good place, and he loses the race by 1/10 of a second to Alex Rins, and he's in the fight for the race win the entire way through. That's testament to the guy's speed around there. It was also on pole 5 straight years. He's never been off the front row
Yeah.
at Phillip Island is an absolutely staggering stat.
And to do a fast lap around here, it's you've got to be brave, you've got to be strong, you've got to know where to push the bike and where not to. And Marc's very impressive. The other one that gets me is I think it's 2015 when he's fastest lap on the last lap of the race and starts that lap in third and wins the Grand Prix. So 2 overtakes. And probably more than 2 overtakes, but fastest lap of the race on the last lap. Shows you the speed the guy's got when he needs to around this place.
Absolutely incredible. That's it for our deep dive into some of the Honda legends that have strutted their stuff at Phillip Island. I'm Matt Clayton, he's Chris Vermeulen. Join us at Phillip Island where we get to see MotoGP bikes in their element every October.